I started at a company called Solon here in Tucson, initially doing mechanical design for dual-axis trackers, and ended up going to Advanced Energy and working on the inverter side of things as an applications engineer. Then I moved to Ameresco, which was one of my favorite customers when I was in the sales side of the inverter business. And then after that, I left and started my own company, which is called Develosol. And that's because I was helping some connections or friends that I'd made over the years in the solar industry who were doing development work, get some of their interconnect applications in and look into some initial permitting and those types of things. And that's what I've been focused on so far, mostly in Oregon. The strategy of Develosol wasn't so well thought out. It was more like there was a lot of work to do and they needed somebody to do it. And I had spent a good chunk of my career, both on the equipment side, on the module side of things, and on the inverter side of things, on the design side, designing rooftop and ground mount, and then doing that again in the C&I space. But I hadn't spent much time on the development side, other than Advanced Energy did a really good job of supporting developers. They were essentially the engineering for a lot of developers in the upfront stages. So that was my developer experience, and I hadn't had much beyond that. So Develosol at the time stood for Develop Solar. Now I think of it more as developing solutions. I designed a system that was very cookie cutter repeatable, 2 rows per inverter, and I think it was 14 inverters. So 28 rows of solar panels, and this was in Michigan, and it was going to be kicked off the installation in the winter. So they tried to get the trenching in before things froze. Things didn't really freeze this winter as much as they had thought, and so they were trying to figure out what they were going to do in their shop versus what they were going to do in the field. The detachable wire box gave them the ability to sort of not leave an expensive thing out in the elements, given that they didn't know what stage they were going to be mounting it necessarily. So they ended up focusing on getting in their AC and their conduit and the trenching all the way back to the main piece of gear. They did that first, and in parallel, folks were installing the solar panels. So as they were doing that, then they were able to bring the DC wiring to that box, but the inverter wasn't mounted at all. So it was a way to, in fact, I think initially they even just had the box connected to conduit without any, which you could never do with the full inverter, but just the wire box itself could be supported off of just the conduit sticking out of the ground. So it allowed them to be pretty flexible in how they sequenced their construction. CPS got started in the US and focused on all the right things, and so I quickly was having to sell against them. When I left Advanced Energy, I worked at Ameresco, and they were using CPS pretty much exclusively on their distributed commercial projects. And so that's when I first got kind of the direct input. But that being said, when you're going into a customer who is now using mostly CPS and you're trying to win back the business, you get a lot of the reasons why they changed and what they liked. And so I got a good feel for CPS before I ever started using them as a customer. Currently, I do a little bit of design consulting, and I'm familiar with the CPS product line, and I'm familiar with the sales team, and I know that they're accessible and easy to reach, and I try to design around a certain block. That's really when I first started digging into CPS, was when I was developing work in Minnesota and looked at the extreme temperature ranges and how that's important when you're looking at power electronics and things like that. So I continue to recommend CPS depending on the application.